Hi, this is Arsen Cash-In, head buyer and inventory manager here at the Boulder Bookstore, and we are doing an edition of Inside the Boulder Bookstore. We have a special video for you today. We're looking at our history as we approach our 50th anniversary, and our guest today is Lisa Gesner, and Lisa was instrumental in really developing the events program here at the store. Well, thanks for being here, Lisa.
Thanks, Arsen, and thanks for inviting me to celebrate the 50th.
Yeah, so well, you're a big part of it. So talk about the events program and what you did and what years you worked here and how that started developing.
I worked here after I graduated from CU Boulder, roughly 89 to 99, and I started as a bookseller and a floor manager, and then I moved into advertising and promotions, and our book signings really picked up steam to the point where I have these notebooks which actually show you how analog we were at the time, that show you that we did hundreds of events a year. So what led to that? Part of that was the move. When we moved from the smaller location down to this main location, the ballroom opened up the possibilities. We could do a lot more. We could have seating. We actually put together microphones and speakers, so we could do more than just have an author come in and sign. I remember Douglas Adams at the old bookstore.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was like people coming to see the Pope. I mean, it was crazy. But all he could do there was sign books. In the ballroom, we had slideshows, readings. We even did a wine tasting one time. And that was all part of what was happening overall. That was the advent of Amazon. It was when Barnes & Noble opened in Boulder, Borders opened down the mall in Boulder, and we had to differentiate. We had to find a way to really live up to being the community bookstore. So as I looked through my calendars in preparation to come talk to you, I saw so many local author names. And it was like seeing old friends. It was really heartwarming, actually. And just a quick aside, one of the people I saw was Juliet Whitman, and I think she's a good example. She was the book reviewer at the Daily Camera, and so we worked with her a lot. She's a breast cancer survivor, and she wrote a Colorado Book Award-winning book called Breast Cancer Journal. And we did an event with her, and it was a lovely event, and it was a celebration not just of her publishing this book, but of her being a survivor, and her friends and family could come here. That's the kind of event that set us apart. And,
you know, a couple of interesting things. Juliet was an amazing person who did many books, many events over the years, but also that she was like a full-time book reviewer for the Camera. Like that a local newspaper would have a book reviewer, because that's totally changed. What kind of press you can get nowadays. Everything's kind of the social media. Another person I think we had back then was Sylvia Pettum, and we've got an event with her coming. It's going to be in the past by the time this video shows, but she's still coming around. So talk about you talked about Douglas Adams. So once we moved to this space, who were some of the big authors or interesting events that you remember?
One that's personally very meaningful, that I look back now and say was life-changing in a way, was Gary Snyder, the Beat poet. I'd always loved the Beats. I was one of the people who moved out to Colorado from the East Coast after reading On the Road, right? And so hosting him in the ballroom and being able to share that one of his poems that I read when I was in college on the East Coast led me to come out here, and having him start the reading that poem mid-August at Sourdough Mountain Lookout, that was huge. And the turnout was huge. And people really loved coming here to see these heroes and heroines, literary folks that they loved. So that was one. Ken Kesey was another. That was a very funny Boulder-ish event.
Oh, that was one of our craziest events ever. We still talk about that at the store.
Yeah, that was a good one, because it was for I think it was probably his last book, Sailor Song. And what he asked us to do is bring a box of books to where he was staying down on the west end of Pearl. And he had all these day glow markers, and he spent the night drawing in these books. It was crazy. But the funny thing was, we went back there the next morning, the day of his book signing, to pick up the books. And as we're pulling the books out of where he was, we realized that he had left a bag of pot in there. And I said to him, Mr. Kesey, as much as we would like to keep this, we think you probably want it back. And he grabbed it and he said, I need that for the rest of my tour. So it was things like that. just all kinds of big names like Amy Tan, Isabel Allende, having them here and having them speak and bringing them to Boulder was very special.
Yeah, I mean, one of the changes that's happened is if we get names that big, we tend not to have them in the ballroom because the ballroom really only fits maybe 120 with any level of comfort. Where we used to pack as many as like 250 in there.
Yes, we did.
And so we'll move off to the library or we'll go to one of the churches. But there was something to be said about having Isabel Allende in the store, you know?
Yeah.
And that was just a big moment. One of the events I remember, partially because of my role in it, was the Gary Hart event.
Yeah.
And this was probably early 94, 95. I can't remember where it fit in. But maybe you could set us up a little bit and tell us why the Gary Hart event would be such a big deal in the mid-90s, because I'm sure some of our viewers are like, Gary Hart?
Yeah, who the heck is that? He was often considered the next John Kennedy. He was an up-and-coming politician. He was on his way to possibly getting the presidential nomination. And so he didn't.
He was the favorite for the Democratic nomination going into 1988's campaign season.
And he was also a Colorado senator. I mean, he represented Colorado to a lot of people nationally. And so he had written a book on leadership. And so we had him here because he was still very popular in Colorado.
Yeah, and they told us that the only thing we couldn't mention was what caused him to not be the leading candidate in 1988, which was there had been rumors of his infidelity going around. And he told the press, you can follow me anywhere you want. And then the next week, they found him on a boat called Monkey Business with a woman who was not his wife. And so not the greatest political move ever, but we weren't supposed to mention that.
That's right.
And so somehow I probably convinced you or told you I want to introduce him because I was so into him in college, right? So I got up there to introduce him. And I said, we're all excited about this, senator from Colorado and as a new voice in the Democratic Party. And we really had high hopes for 1988. And then, of course, I realized I had talked myself into a corner because then what happened was he was discovered on a boat with a woman, which I couldn't say.
Yeah.
So then, of course, I said, great sexual entendre. I said, and then something came up.
Yes. Oh, I will never forget his face. I don't think he was a very happy guy at that point. But he had a great signing. We sold books and...
You recovered perfectly. You covered for me. I don't know. Somehow you pulled that together.
Yeah. We had a lot of interesting moments. But yeah, that was a fun one. That was a good one.
So aside from the events, what are some of your memories of those days at the store? It was a different time. And Boulder was different back then. Yeah. We were different. Like when you think back on those years, what are some of the things you think about?
I do think about the fight with the chains. That was a big deal. And it meant that we had to be more business-like. It used to be build it and they will come, right? And it wasn't like that anymore. And I give credit to you and celebrate you on your 30th anniversary with the store because you brought business acumen to the store. And simple things like we need to have a better return strategy, helping us with the margins. So overall, we had to get more serious about being a business as well as being a community center. I also remember how spiritual Boulder was at the time. Mm-hmm. If you look through the events, you see two main themes. Three. One is local authors, a lot of local authors. Another is books on spirituality, things that were kind of launched here, made from our bestseller list, made it onto national bestseller lists, but also things like social responsibility. Tom Chappell, Tom's of Maine, the toothpaste and all that. Do you remember his events? Mm-hmm. Business for Social Responsibility. That actually kicked off a local group called, I think it was BSR or BSA, Business, something in Boulder that was dedicated towards independent businesses. Mm. So I think that was another theme, was how are we changing in that way? Yeah, well,
BIBA, the Boulder Independent Business Alliance, was one of the very first independent business alliances in the country, and David was instrumental in the founding. That started. That person who ran that was on our payroll for a while. We were paying the person to get this independent business thing going.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like it still feels like that for different reasons. And that's one of the things that's amazed me. And I never would have guessed when I started the store in 92, and probably for you when you came in 89 as a bookseller, like, hey, fun, we're going to sell some books. but you find yourselves kind of in the trenches, in the front lines of culture wars,
Yes.
of business wars. Like it's kind of a little different than what people expect when they start working here, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things too, that working here helped educate a lot of people about how they can have a voice in their community, and how there are things that are worth fighting for, like banned books. We always did a big banned books week, and sadly, we still need to do things like that.
More than ever.
More than ever, yeah.
It's easier to find books for it now.
Yeah.
So I guess that's I don't.
I've taken to donating my books to the small libraries around towns that I live in, just to get them out there.
So do you have any special memories with David? David is such a character, the owner of the store for all 50 years, and he was maybe even more of a character back then. So
yeah.
And is there anything special you could tell us about working with him?
There's a couple things. One is that one of the things we did to fight the chains was become involved in the Independent Booksellers Consortium, which was the best of the best. I saw recently Joyce Meskis of Tattered Cover passed away, and there's many others who were involved in this. And we would meet once a year or so, and he was very, very involved in that. And I saw a real honest commitment to that and to the business for social responsibility. So that's a very positive memory. And then there's the funny memories. One of them was the Amy Tan book signing. We had 200
people.
Some people
It was crazy.
in the store. It was crazy. It was elbow to elbow. And at that moment, David decided that we should replace the remainder table that was right next to where all the people were standing in line, which meant that we had to haul all these big, huge stacks of books, replace them with other big, huge stacks of books. Now, in hindsight, I can say if the books aren't out, you can't sell them. But it was an odd time.
It was an odd time. He couldn't wait an hour. Well, I mean, that's one of the things about David, right? And sometimes the ideas have been great. I mean, it's the driving force behind the store to some extent. But he gets an idea, and boom, it has to be now.
Yeah. 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 Well, he built a successful business. I mean, I remember when it was much, much smaller, and I do give him a lot of credit. And this is my chance too to say the booksellers. I'm looking at Stephanie here. I mean, so many of you have done so much. It's a labor of love. And despite the do what you love, the money will follow book, it's tough in book selling, especially in a town like Boulder. Mm-hmm. And so a big shout out to all of you who put your heart and soul into it.
We're going to have a big party in North Boulder Park, August 27th, for all staff for the history of the store.
Oh my goodness.
So if you want to come to North Boulder Park at 5 o'clock on August 27th, we're going to have, and you're out there and you're an ex-staff member of any vintage, any year, any amount of time you worked, even if you were fired, you could come to the party.
I'll be there
on August 27th. So what have you taken with the rest of your career that you learned here? Like what that 10 years, what has that meant to you now in the 20 years since then, or 25 almost?
A couple things. I graduated with an English degree at CU, and what are you going to do with that? Well, book selling was a logical progression. But it's the storytelling, that a lover of literature, a lover of books, a lover of meeting authors. Even as I went into becoming what I am now, still a very part-time marketing consultant, it was, number one, working for nonprofits, right? And working for places and companies and people who believe in making a difference. Mm-hmm. That was very much instilled in me here. And the other is storytelling. Marketing is a lot of storytelling. And I was immersed in not only the books themselves, but how people talked about their books. Hosting all those events, meeting all those authors, working with others who loved books. You realize how powerful stories are in our lives. And I'm still now, I just turned 61, and I'm immersing myself in fairy tales. Fairy tale novels, the history of fairy tales, things like that. So that stuck with me, and I hope all is well.
When you left in 1999, I was really not happy about that. But and I always thought, she'll be back in 6 months. Yeah, something that I think that was like my coping mechanism. Like, she needs to wander about, and then she'll come back. But at least we got you back now, 24 years later.
Well, thank you.
Here you are. For an interview.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been great having you, Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you did for the store, because I really think you set us on the trajectory that we're on now, and that we continue to do, and these big events that Stephanie puts together. And So I think that was critical for our success. So I really appreciate everything you did. And
Thanks,
so
Arsen.
thank you for watching another edition of Inside the Boulder Bookstore. If you like what you see here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.